Welcome to Please Me. This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Eve is a licensed physical therapist who treats conditions that relate to sexual health. Please sit back and enjoy the show. Hello, lovelies, and welcome to another sexy episode of Please Me, the podcast that aims to destigmatize conversations about sex by turning the sheets into our classroom. And today, I have a guest who will be telling me about his guilty confessions, although I certainly hope there is no true guilt there. This guest has been through a whirlwind of life, surviving a rare cancer, all while living his very best sexually liberated life. His quote, "The biggest revenge is a great life," really speaks to me because he seems to be taking his life by the balls and directing it where he wants it to go. Edward Miskie is now cancer-free, happy 10-year anniversary, and has written a book called Cancer, Musical Theater, and Other Chronic Illnesses, which is being adapted currently for television, which is just so exciting to me. And I can't wait to hear all about it. He's been featured on Insider, ABC, Fox 5, Pix 11, and now Please Me. Edward is also an actor, singer, songwriter, and producer, and I can't believe I get to talk to him about his sex life. So, without further ado, let me welcome Edward to Please Me. Hi, Edward. How are you today?
Hi, Eve. I'm doing well. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. I hope you're not going to be shy for me today because I have a lot of interesting questions for you.
Never have I
You
ever
mentioned,
been shy in my life.
okay, well, there we go. Very good. I'm glad to hear that. So, you mentioned in your early notes to me that you fucked your way through cancer. And I just love your bluntness about all of it. How did you use sex to cope?
I mean, it really was as simple as that. It was to cope. I think a lot of times, I view sexuality as a weapon for good and for bad. You know, obviously you can do with that what you choose in the good and or bad way. But for me, it became kind of a self-destructive weapon during that period of time because I wanted so badly to feel normal. And this was at the point during my cancer treatment where like the way that I looked had really, really hit a very bad place. And it didn't occur to me that it had gone so far to the wayside because body dysmorphia and like wanting to be like, I look fine. Until my radiation team they were talking to me and they were so kind and they were just like, oh, what was your life like before all this happened? And I was like, oh, I'm an actor. And so they asked me to see a photo of myself like doing a show, and I showed them my old headshot and they were like, that's you. And it immediately just like cut so deep because it was this reality of like how far I'd fallen physically from that point. And then realizing, the guy that I was dating at the time had kind of like been more distant and everything just felt so bad. And so I was like, I know how I can make myself feel pretty again. I'm just going to go fuck everyone I can get my hands on. And so that's what I did. And it wasn't as consistent as it sounds. Like it, to say like I fucked away with your cancer is true. It's not false. But it wasn't like every single day, but it was when I would hit these low points that I was like, maybe this will make me feel better this time. Maybe this will make me feel better this time. And, the night that happened, that instance with the radiation team, I just kind of went home and I fired up one of my little like my apps on my phone and I just started like getting people to come over like one after the other. And I didn't care. I just like wanted someone to touch me and to make me feel like I was acceptable at that point, which is really fucked up in a way. But in hindsight, like, should I have done that? Maybe not. But it was really owning my sexuality and trying to like harness it in a way to make me feel empowered about what was happening and to garnish some kind of control over what was happening. Because when you're in a situation like that, when you're going through chemo and radiation and questioning your mortality and am I going to live through this, you don't have a lot of control. What you do have control over is how you feel about it and how you react to it. And how I reacted to it wasn't always the most responsible or wasn't exactly what the doctor would have ordered. But it was what I chose to do, and I don't think I would change it because I learned a lot about myself during that period of time in doing that.
Absolutely. I mean, sex is a way to feel good and to escape from the realities of your day to day and just let yourself feel human and in touch with your body and your pleasure, and be in the moment. You know, it seems like in some ways, you said you wouldn't change it because obviously it brought you to where you are today. Was this a way for you to kind of center yourself or escape, or you were seeking validation for, how you looked and how you felt about yourself?
It was kind of all three, to be honest. I mean, obviously the surface level validation of like I want to feel pretty, that was there. But then it was also escapism because it was like I was doing an activity that I used to really like beforehand that took me out of the cancer situation where it had nothing to do with doctors or hospitals or medication, or I didn't have to think about it. It was just something that like, you know, not that this is really what was happening per se, but like I could just lay there and have it happen. Um and to simplify it, but it was all three of those things, and I don't think it would be fair to separate them and say, "Oh, I was only doing it for validation," because I was, but there was more to it than that.
Of course. I mean, and part of it is, validation, meaning like just, feeling good about yourself and having someone validate you as a human being and, and your right to pleasure and giving you that, because we all deserve pleasure. It's a tool. Sex is a tool that we have in our toolbox as humans in order to cope with what life throws our way. And I want other people to see it like that. Our nervous systems were wired for pleasure. So no matter what you're going through, your body will always be ready to feel good for you. You mentioned during your time, while you were getting your treatments just a second ago, that you had a breakup. What was going through that in the midst of all of the chaos you were going through? How did that, translate in your life?
I mean, it was pretty terrible. It was a surprise. I slowly started to see it coming, and then when it actually happened, it was because he was stupid and put something on social media that was very much like, "You're no longer in the picture, and I'm just playing along." Um, and so, I mean, it was terrible because, as I said, you don't have control over anything that you're going through during that experience, and so then to also have someone, um, basically what happened is he was with someone from an early point from my diagnosis and just didn't tell me and was kind of like playing this game of like, I'm going to be here for you because that's what you need, but I'm actually going to dip out. um which
Wow.
in hindsight I completely understand. Like that's asking a lot of a person with whom you have not been with for that long. We had only really been together in totality for a year, and 6 months of that was while I was in the hospital. I guess four or 5 months at that point. um so it's a lot to ask, but in the moment I was furious, I was scared. It was a piece of normalcy that I could hold on to and point to and be like, look, I am normal, I have someone. And that going away just kind of put me into a deeper, I don't want to say depression, but it was a hole of sorts where it was just like nothing is going right. It was around the same time that they were like, nothing's working, we don't know what to do, best of luck. And I looked terrible, I felt terrible, my career had gone away, I had lost some friends at that point. And it was just one more thing, it was just another thing that was like, oh my God, like what else can go wrong? But I think in the end, I mean, it was definitely the right thing. That person was not the right person for me at all. Um, it just in the moment felt like that was something I could look forward to. That was like the promise that when this is over, there's going to be someone there for me. And when they were not, it became sad. And actually, because lemonade out of lemons, queen of that over here. During that breakup, I decided to start an online magazine, and it was geared towards tall men. It was a lifestyle magazine that I created originally as a blog and then turned it into a bigger thing. And I ran that for 5 years. And it was because of that breakup, because he was very tall. He was 6'10". And I was like, how am I ever going to meet another guy that size ever again? I was like, oh, I'll create an online magazine. And it kind of, I think the onus of it started as like, I'm going to create my own dating pool. But then what ended up happening is I made some really great friends because of that, some of which I'm still friends with. One of which lives literally across the hall from me right now, in my apartment building, that I met during that period of time that I was putting this magazine together. And it gave me a project to kind of bury myself in and distract myself from for the hardest part of what was to come. And so in a way, it felt very much like that was what was supposed to happen.
Wow. And finding out, the way that you did on social media is just so low. I mean, and I always, say, or I believe I should say that, we can take a lot more than people give us credit for,
Oh yeah.
so honesty would have been so much better, than just doing what he did, and so, we are not fragile, we, even though we may look fragile, we are not fragile and we can handle it, so honesty is always the best policy. And I always talk about communication in relationships. Um,
That was the
and
next thing coming out of my mouth.
absolutely, you can expand on that. Go for it.
I mean, really, like that's what's to expand on it. It's kind of self-explanatory. The more you communicate within the realms of a relationship, whether that be a very surface level sexual relationship, I don't think straight people have to do this per se, but this is definitely a more queer spectrum kind of thing where you decide who's playing what role or who's going to be in what role and what position and whatnot, and who's the active and more passive and whatever. And that's a conversation that we have frequently. And so we're more open about sexuality a lot of the time. At least I think it's perceived that we are, because we have to be, because we have to have that conversation. If you both have similar parts, then it's kind of like, okay, well, who's going to be doing what with what parts? What do you like? What don't you like? What do you want to do? What don't you want to do? It's like the what are you into kind of thing. And in a way that straight people don't have to, because it's kind of understood, like one way or another this is going in here, and like whether you're more dominant or less dominant about it is kind of like the spectrum of what you figure out. But it's less of a conversation and more of just to figure it out as you go. And for us, I think we're super lucky because we do get to communicate that, and we do get to say, oh, this is what I like, this is what I do. And it's just kind of like, hi, my name is Edward, I'm 6'4", I like to do these things, like that's just kind of how it is. And beyond the scope of sexuality within a relationship, how you feel, what is your communication style? Like for me, like dating is it's like a job interview for these things. It's not just like, what do you do? Where are you from? What are you looking for? It's like, how do you communicate? What is your communication style? I'm an over communicator. I'm just going to tell it. I'm going to tell it like it is. I'm going to say it. And I will bide my time on an appropriate time when I feel like it's the right time to communicate what I'm feeling or want to say. But if we all just learned how to do that, a lot of relationships would survive or not start in the first place, because how many people are in relationships that they shouldn't be in, and they're just there because of whatever the fuck reason. But if we all learned how to communicate our wants and needs and expectations and our perceptions to our partners, we'd all be better off.
Oh my
And so
God,
for
yes.
me, yeah. And so for me, during the situation that we're talking about with the breakup during chemo, like, had he just communicated with me, like, hey, I don't think I can handle this. This is too much for me. In the very beginning, before I even started chemo, yeah, it would have sucked and I would have been scared, but I would have at least been able to lean on my family and friends in a different way than me leaning on this person who didn't want to be leaned on, who wasn't equipped to be leaned on, who didn't have the emotional intelligence or strength to be leaned on. And so again, it's just that communication factor where it's like, I just need to assert myself and say, this is not what I want. I'm not okay with this, and have that dialogue. And I think people are so afraid to have that dialogue because of the fear of losing something that they think that they have. when in truth, for my circumstances, I didn't really have it at all. It was the
right?
perception that I had it because that's what he let me believe. But I wasn't going to lose anything because I didn't have anything to lose.
That's
That
so
just was
true.
not communicated to me.
Yes. And, communication is so key in relationships. And I think gay people do it better, because you do have those conversations initially about sexuality, what you like, what you don't like, who's going to be dominant, who's going to be submissive. And, it could be all of the above, or it could be one or the other. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's what you agree upon. And, you're right that straight couples don't have these kind of conversations, and we're supposed to just muddle through, and figure out what we like and don't like. And we should be having those conversations. And I'm just going to bring up here, because I talk a lot about this, the orgasm gap and how, men typically get their needs met in sex. And a lot of times women don't, because we aren't communicating what we like. And what we see in the media is always penetrative sex, which is what stimulates a man to climax, but not a woman to climax. So if we aren't telling our partners what we like, we will never get our orgasm gap, equal, with the man. And in lesbian relationships, there is really no orgasm gap, because we know what we like, we communicate what we want. And it's super interesting to me, that you have those kinds of conversations, right, about sexuality, which should really be happening in every relationship, but you aren't having the conversations, or you didn't in this circumstance have the conversations about connection, about staying together, about what you can handle, what support during this time, all of that. And he probably felt bad to leave you at that point, and so he was pretending. And why do that to you? That is just cruel, and honesty would have been so much easier,
Yeah.
because regardless, you had to move on from it, whether it was a year later, or, if it would have happened, 6 months before, so honesty is so important in relationships, and really communicating all of the nitty gritty, like all of the stuff that you don't want to say. Those are the things that you really do need to say.
Well, and also too, I mean, I might get these numbers wrong, so any listener fact check me. But I think I read somewhere that it's like 98% of men in relationships, when faced with something traumatic like cancer or something of the like, leave. And it's something like 85% of women stay. So it's this, again, this huge gap. And I think a lot of that has to do with communication and just not being able to convey that you're not the right person for this person. And I think it has very much less to do with the circumstances under which they're leaving. And it's just the tipping point. If you're, excuse me, if you're not willing to stay for that person during something like that, then I don't think that you were meant to be with that person to begin with. Because, like, not that this has to be the standard under which we're having this conversation, but like the till death do us part kind of mentality of being in a relationship, being in a marriage. If that's not real for you and you're not willing to stay during a cancer diagnosis or treatment or whatever, then like you shouldn't have been together in the first place. And that's kind of the bigger pill to swallow and the harder pill to swallow during, like, to have that realization and conversation. And if we would all just be a little bit better at communicating, I bet you that 98% would go down.
Absolutely. Communication is so key. And, really talking these things through could get you to the other side, and maybe to a compromise where, you decide that maybe, you need an open relationship at that point, so that you can support the person that you're with, but also get your needs met in another way. Who knows what it is for you? I mean, I'm just throwing that out there because, I
Yeah.
consider myself open in my relationships. But, obviously there's just so many ways that you can communicate and come to a consensus, even if that means breaking up, but not, being, one sided, and the other person being disrespected. So hugely, you know. I personally am a relationship anarchist. I like to throw all that crap that doesn't serve me, like societal constructs and family pressures, out the window. Did your mind shift during this time about how you view relationships today?
I think it certainly threw some walls up, for sure, and like the therapy that I did during this period of time and after helped a little bit with that, but it has very much left me in a place where I would rather like myself alone than not like myself with someone else. And I really, again, think that if communicating with other people is very important, but also self-communication and talking to yourself, whether that be out loud or in your head, about like, why am I here? What do I like? What do I want? I think a lot of these relationship situations with something like a cancer diagnosis, et cetera, happen because people are trained and indoctrinated to get married so young. Like most people get married in their 20s. And I understand for, like baby birthing humans, that is a biological necessity to a degree. But like maybe if we took some time to live some life and get to know ourselves a little bit better, the relationships that we're entering in would be from a more fully formed brain and fully formed human and life experience, so that we aren't seeing a higher divorce rate. We aren't seeing a huge gap in single people in their 30s and 40s. Because, I'm 37. I've been single now for 10 years and I like it. I've dated, I've done some things here and there, but I'm so comfortable in my own apartment by myself in my own skin for the most part, um, that there would have to be some astronomically impressive human that came along that I would just be completely derailed. And then I would be able to navigate that from a very like informed and formed um place, because the communication of it all would be there, and that includes how one communicates. Again, over communicator will not shut up, need to say it. But then also like what your sexual wants and needs are and what your relationship expectations are. If you're like, well, I'm going to enter into this relationship, and you never communicate to them like, I would like to be married in 3 years, that is my timeline. That's like, I have a very close friend who was with someone for about 2.5 years longer than they should have been, because their end goals were so totally different. And the one reached their end goal time frame headspace in that time period, whereas the other one didn't, and never really was going there. And so they ended up breaking up 2.5 years after they should have, because they didn't communicate that to each other. And like they would communicate it to me individually and like apart from each other. And so I knew, but it wasn't my place to communicate that to the other one. So
Wow,
like
what a place to put you in.
I mean, it's good friends. We love them. But it's weird being, oftentimes queer people get saddled with being the confidant of multiple people within their friend circle. And if you're a good person and you're good at keeping secrets, and you confide and people confide in you in that way, then you don't spill the beans. And so I've seen a lot of these relationships in heteronormative relationships fall apart for this very reason, because they're not communicating, especially not about sex. Oh my God, the amount of
Not at
heteronormative
all.
relationships I've seen fall apart because they don't talk about sex. It's just something they do. And like every so often I have a couple friends that are very open and communicative about their relationships with their like heteronormative partner. um but like I've seen so many fall apart because they just can't have the conversation, or they can't bring themselves to have the conversation, or they break up because a year or two in they realize, oh, this person's into something that freaks me out or that I'm not into, and so I need to dip. And that's more often than not butt stuff, like whatever. Men are so weird about butts. I can't even get into it.
Straight men? Are you talking about straight men?
Yes.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
gays are great. Gays are great with their butts. It's another weapon we have.
It's funny because you're right. Some straight men are like, don't even go down there. It is not a region of my body. It is, it's off, completely off limits. And,
Well, there
some
was that
other
whole
people
thing. I
are
don't know
willing to
how,
explore.
yeah, I
But
don't know how active you are on TikTok, but I live my life on TikTok. I love it so much. And there was this whole thing going around about how straight guys don't wash their butts in the shower. And it was like I'm
that's
not
just,
kidding. It was like it was disgusting. And it was these women who would like secretly film their boyfriends being like, "Hey, do you wash your butt in the shower?" And they'd be like, "No." Or like they'd let they're like, "Oh, I let like water trickle down there, but like, I'm not like getting in there." And it was like, oh my God, straight guys are not washing their butts. Oh no. Just from like a hygienic cleanliness place. That's
that is
terrible.
crazy. I've never heard that. And yes, I'm on TikTok, but to promote my podcast, I'm not really that active on it, and I still don't quite understand it. But I never heard that. That's disgusting. And please, no matter who you are, straight, gay,
Get
in
in there.
between, and everything in between, get in there and clean yourself, because
Wash your butt.
cleanliness is so important, when it comes to sexuality. Like, you don't want the region smelling funky, you want it to be clean as a whistle.
Right.
So,
Or having any leftovers, like we
God,
don't need that
yes,
either.
please. That's so
Uh,
disgusting.
it's so
Yeah, well,
disgusting.
that's hilarious. And thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'm going to make sure
You're
that I
you're
have
so very welcome.
the shower running before any encounter now. Go ahead and,
Right.
make your way into the shower, and be sure to turn around and wash your butt too.
Right. I think I heard someone call it the credit card where you just like you like swipe up and down the clean.
And is that the right way to do it, or not the right way to do it? It's
I
not enough.
I don't I don't think there is a right way to do it as long as you're doing it. Like it doesn't
Yes,
matter how you
absolutely.
do it, like oh my God, where has this conversation led to?
I don't know. I don't know. But I do like to talk about, things like anal sex, because it feels lovely. For
It
many
does.
people like it. And I'm not shy about these conversations at all. So I think it's funny to just bring up, and it's so important to talk to your partner about what you actually like. If you don't like anal sex and they do, and you wait 3 years to let them know, I mean, what a waste of time.
But
So
also how sad that you're like enduring something that you don't like and you're doing for them instead of just being like, hey, that's not really a thing for me. But like maybe this is a place where we can open a relationship up and be like, go find someone who does and like have your rules and parameters set. And as long as you trust that person enough to follow those rules and parameters and come home to you and everything's hunky dory, this is where I think straight people are failing in the relationship department, especially when it comes to sex, because they're so afraid of having an open relationship or having some kind of like person swing in to like take care of the needs of the other person that one of them is not willing to take care of, which is fine. That doesn't make your partner a lesser person. That doesn't make your partner a villain for like not letting you do what you want to get off to. But it's like let's be intelligent adults and have a conversation about like, well, I really like doing this. It's not a deal breaker, but if I would want to do this and you're not willing to, cool, but can we then open this door like a couple times a year for me to go take care of these needs? And that makes you a better partner, that makes them a happier partner and therefore a better partner. And I just think like straight people just need to get over it. They just need to get over it.
I mean, that's so true, because not one person can check off all of your boxes. It's literally impossible. And to put that amount of pressure on one person to be your everything, like, nobody can do that. So you're already setting yourself up for failure. So if you're having these conversations early on, and I'm not talking on that on the first date, obviously, you have to build some kind of connection and some kind of relationship. But once you do build that trust, to have these conversations is so important, because not one person can check all of those boxes. And if there's some boxes that you really want checked off, and that person is not willing to, but they're great in a lot of other ways, like, why not explore that with somebody else that does? And life is too short. It
It's
because
too
you live
short.
way too short.
Yes. And I would also question, like, I think the mentality of a lot of people in relationships, whether they be heteronormative or otherwise, is if you're with a partner that isn't into something that you're into, But you're willing to stay with that person for other reasons, that the assumption is you have to kill that version or that part of you that you want to receive pleasure from, whether it's anal sex or something else within a heteronormative relationship. The thought is like, oh, well, then you just don't do that anymore because you've chosen this person who doesn't want to do it. And I think that's such a dangerous game to play, because then you get into the whole resentment thing of it, and you're gonna feel like you sound stupid if you're like, I resent you because you won't let me put it in the butt, and then that's kind of like that sounds so childish, but like to someone who like that feels good for, that has done that before and knows that they like it, to have that part of them cut off, like of course they're going to resent that. Like substitute anything in there. It doesn't have to be sex related, but substitute anything in there that someone has given up for another person in there because they love that person. There's always going to be a piece of resentment there, always. And it's just how you deal with it and how you, again, communicate that makes the difference.
Absolutely. It's so key. It's so key to communicate. What other ways would you say that your life changed because of your cancer, besides the sexual? Because obviously we're talking a lot about that, which I love. But,
Yes.
I'd love to know like what other ways, you changed.
Well, I mean, it's been a journey, right? Like, I didn't pop out on the other side and be like, I'm going to become a new person. Although, in hindsight, I really wish I would have, because that's really what you're being afforded. And I talk a lot about how once you're done with something as huge as surviving cancer or getting through treatment for cancer, you do really come out on the other side with the opportunity to become a new person. However, I spent, and I suspect many others have spent, a lot of time trying to go back to being the person that they were before. And I just find that to be not possible. Like that, I really do consider and look at that version of me as a dead person, um no longer existing, just not there, and you get to create this wonderful new human on the other side of it with so much more perspective about life and so much, it's like the tree of knowledge. Like, now that you know, you can't unknow it, and so like let's move forward with this new information. And so I think a lot of my career choices have been anchored, cancer's been a huge linchpin for me, that kind of everything hinges off of it, which sounds so stupid, but like, I during that period of time, I didn't want to be the cancer kid. I didn't want to play the cancer card. I didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't a major part of me. And here I am, 10, 11 years later. That's all I talk about. um and so in that way, it has changed my life. Like, I would never have thought 10 years ago that I would be doing podcast interviews about a book that I wrote about my experience as a patient. It never would have occurred to me. It wasn't until a couple years later that I was like, I need to do something with this. Something's happening in my brain that I want to talk about. And it wasn't until I started meeting other people, which I also did because of my experience in cancer, um, to talk to them about their experiences and confirm what I suspected was true, which is that you're just so, like your compass is broken. You're so lost, and there's no real way to navigate forward without consciously knowing that, um I'm trying to think of a good example of it, just really. So again, like the default of going back to having sex to make yourself feel a particular way during my treatment, that happened after treatment too, and exploring things that I had been exploring prior, because I was in my 20s. I was in my early 20s when this happened. And so I was sexually active, I was dating, I was seeing people, I was going to sex parties, I was doing all kinds of crazy shit because I was exploring that part of me. And so after treatment, I went back to that because it was like, I'm going to pick up where I left off. And like that to me was the wrong decision. And yes, I learned a lot about myself by doing that. However, being more attuned to the idea that you get to start over would have been so much more fun, and I would have approached it from a much more playful place, to be like, oh my God, I could just be a whole new person. Like, how can we do this? Like, where are the building blocks? Let's get started. Instead of being like, oh God, I don't know what I'm doing, where, and just going through the motions of what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And I mean that on a professional stance. I mean that in relationships. I mean that with sex. I mean that with diet, food, exercise, etc. I just kind of defaulted to what I knew, and I felt displaced the whole time. I felt displaced the entire time. And so it was really then figuring out why I felt displaced and what I really wanted from feeling displaced, like what would make me feel not displaced. And that took me years to figure out. I'm really only now within the last 2 years coming into that and being like, oh, this is what I should have done. Not that I would trade the last couple, decade or anything, to skip over any of the lessons that I've learned, but it really, it really kind of changed the whole thing, step by step, slowly.
Yeah, and you say that if you would have thought of it in a different perspective from the beginning, but really, you have to you also have to mourn, the life that you are also giving up to create this new one. So that takes time, and obviously, it took you this amount of time to get to that point, because obviously, there's a lot of sadness and fear during this whole time, trying to figure out how you're gonna, if you were gonna live your life, what your life in 10 years is going to really be like if you're given a diagnosis that's very dire, you know
Well, and
so
I would also say that it's not that it's the life that you're giving up. It's the life that was taken from you.
right.
Because like
True.
I didn't show up at the hospital and like offer my life up on a silver platter to be like,
Absolutely.
please take me. It was very much like grab you and drag you in kicking and screaming. Like the first week in the hospital was awful. It was so scary. No one told us what was going on. We kind of like knew what was going to happen because we had seen movies and TV about cancer or whatever, but like there was no real like, okay, day one at this time we're going to send you in for surgery to put this port in, and then you're going to start this, and then a couple hours later this. There was none of that. So we were just kind of like being tossed around like a rag doll. Like, okay, I guess I'm going over here now. Like, cool.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and so like I very much tried to use the language that life was taken, and I was robbed of it. Because I would not like to pretend that had this not happened and I would have gone along my merry way, that I would be in a very different place right now. Whether that place would be better or worse, I don't know. It would just be different. Um, and it does feel a little unfair sometimes that I was 25 years old, like peak hotness in my life. With a very promising career in front of me, and I had all of that snatched away to go sit in a hospital and get pumped full of drugs. And me doing this and everything with my book, with the TV adaptation and the billboard in Times Square this year, and the press and everything around it, and all the good things that have come of it, is kind of in a way my revenge on my former self and to cancer, that I get to live a better life than I might have had cancer not happen. And so it's very much to me a middle finger to cancer to say like, hey, fuck you, you did this to me, but look at what I'm doing with it. And then my earlier 20s former self to be like, hey, like you got totally fucked, but I got you, buddy. Like this is the revenge life we're getting because this happened.
And that person is still part of you, it's inside of you, so you're doing it together, and I commend you for that, because you've taken something very negative and you've turned it into something very positive, in your life, and you're doing incredible things. I'm so excited to see the TV adaptation and all of that. What other positive ways do you feel like your life has changed, and I think maybe you've covered all of that already, but any specifics that you can go into?
I mean, I always talk about how my experience in the hospital really shined a very bright spotlight on friends and family and how they've got my back. And I think, and this wasn't brought to my attention until shutdown happened during Handyland, that not everyone has that. And I totally took it for
Right,
granted because I
right.
just was like, oh, everyone has like their pod of friends that is like there for them no matter what. And my friend Kevin, I was checking in on him during the early weeks of a shutdown, and he was like, how are you doing? I was like, I'm great. I was like, I don't need to be anywhere. No one wants to talk to me. No one's reaching out to me. I love it. And then also, two of my best friends lived within a few blocks of my apartment. One other one lived across the park from me, which is walkable. So we would regularly get together and like do like a social distance walk with like masks and things on. And it was fun. And we had a great time and we made the absolute best of a bad situation. And I was telling him this, and he was like, not everyone has that. You're so lucky. And I was like, what do you mean not everyone has that? And he just kind of explained to me, like, some people don't have those friends. And I think the late teens, early 20s, brand new to New York, Sex and the City version of me is like, oh, of course, everyone has a Samantha, Carrie, Miranda, Charlotte. Like, everyone has that. I have that. Everyone has that. And the realization that not everyone does, um, years later after cancer really kind of put another very bright spotlight on the friend circle, and realizing that I was so lucky to have them during that period of time while I was in the hospital. We would have parties in my hospital room, and we would get together on days I didn't have treatment and go places and do things, and they kept me occupied, and they were so great with me. And then to know that those same friends were still there during shutdown and they're still here now, and it just really, and family too, and that is one of the best things that came out of that whole experience.
And I think too, also because you are an over communicator, you probably were in a lot of ways setting these sorts of, connections up, or reaching out to people. And a lot of people don't feel that ability to connect with people all of the time like that, or to communicate or to even ask for help. Asking for help, it can be very
That's a
difficult and
big one.
scary,
Yeah.
So, being that you are an over communicator and you put it all out there and people are hearing you, and saying, hey, I can help you, I can step up, I can be there for you. I think a lot of people don't have that, and it's so important. So, again, another reason why communication is so key, you know.
Yeah. I mean, and that took me a long time to learn. I was also terrible at asking for help. I thought I could do everything myself, and I didn't want to bother anyone. I didn't want to, oh, they don't need to hear from me. Now I don't care. I don't care if you need to hear from me or not. If I want to talk to you and I want to say something to you and bring you into something or have a conversation, I'm going to do it. And a lot of that comes from, obviously the hindsight of cancer and the realization of the friend circle and everything else, but also because I have lost friends along the way, a lot of them. I had lost a handful of friends by the time I graduated high school. And, like, you're not cognizant of this back then, but, you know, over communication to me is just saying everything you want to say to that person because maybe it's the last time you see them and you just don't know. There was a friend, I'm still not over it. There was a friend that I am that we all lost right before shutdown happened. He was one of the most insanely talented people I've ever met, gorgeous man. And he was part of this concert tour that I had put together, and he was rehearsing with us and everything else. And he had to go in for a back surgery, and the back surgery went swimmingly. It was a very dangerous, crucial surgery to have, and he got one of the top specialists in the world to do it, and he was completely fine. And I went to go visit him. We hung out in his apartment for a little bit, and the next day he was dead, and he was completely fine. It was just a blood clot.
Wow.
And I still to this day am not over that. And it happened right before shutdown, so I didn't have time to get over it because we went right from his memorial to the world shutdown, and I've lost my job and everything else. And so he's also kind of one of the sticking points I think of when it's like, please communicate with people. Please tell them what you want to say to them because you just don't know. You just don't know. And he was perfectly fine the last time I saw him. And then just like in an instant, completely gone. So like
Wow.
talk to people, say what you mean what you say,
Yes. And don't wait,
and
don't
don't
wait.
wait.
Don't wait. There's, never a better time than now to tell people what's on your mind, especially if it's something really important to you, you know,
Yeah,
um, whatever it may be. Obviously this podcast is about sex and I'm always talking about being open about sex, but just anything, anything that you feel you really need to tell the other person or whoever, it's important to communicate all of the time because you're right, life is too short. And in one moment, a blood clot can, completely change your life. And really, any surgery has that as a
As
possibility,
a risk. Yeah.
as a
Well,
risk. Exactly.
and two, I don't know how like woo woo you get. I'm like on the fence with some of the woo, but like there's a reason why to me why your head, heart, and like sex chakra are stacked on top of each other. They're all connected. And so when your thoughts and your brain and your heart and your sex organs are all connected, that's when you are the most human you can be. And that again is nothing but communication. If you feel it in your heart, if you feel it in your head, say it. And I think of like people talk about like, oh, your chakra channels are clear, blah blah blah. And it sounds so dumb, but really when you think about it, at least for me, and you have people who are pansexual, demisexual, sapiosexual, whatever you like, we can get into all that. I don't really remember what someone told me that I was. It was one of those. It's not pan. I think it's sapio. It doesn't matter.
I'm
But
definitely
I'm
sapiosexual too.
right. I'm like I'm more into you if I know that you have ambitions and that you're really smart and that you're a funny person. Like that just makes me more into you. Like
Such a
I
turn
can
on, right?
completely such a turn on, and I can totally hook up with someone that I know nothing about, and that's totally fine. It's whatever. But like my preference specifically in a relationship is when I know everything about you and I am impressed with everything about you. That communicates to my heart that I'm safe. And when I feel safe and secure with a person, then everything else just aligns. And again, it's the communication of it all. Like if I can see that you
It's
are like,
internal communication. Your
it's in,
brain, your heart, and your genitals are all
yes,
communicating with each other, your nervous
they
system,
are.
and it's
Exactly.
interesting that you brought up the chakras because it's such a visual. If you think about the chart, and, I'm not an Eastern medicine person, I do love acupuncture, but, I can just envision the chart and how all the chakras are lined up. And I never really thought of
Yeah.
it that way, but it truly is like a connection between everything. Everything's communicating with itself,
Yeah.
and
And when those channels are clear because you've done the work to communicate with your head, your heart, and your loins, then then the clear channels give you a path forward with that person or with yourself. And that's why therapy is so important. That's why self-reflection and journaling is so important because it gets the muck that's mucking up that channel and that pathway out, and it kind of is like the little toothbrush for that for that little channel to like clean it out. But I've always, and this is also something that I feel that I think I've always felt, but I've been more active in this kind of mindset as an older adult now, an elder millennial, if you will. That um I'm one of the older millennials. I hate it. Um, but it's the idea that I don't really want to like have sex with someone until I'm at a place where I can see their accomplishments and their ambitions and their brain and their heart and where they're coming from, and all of that. Like their communication skill can be sexy to me. Like there's very much going on with me that's kind of new in this language that I now have that I was not familiar with before about what is sexually attractive to me. And like, yes, like big, tall, like burly man, of course. Who doesn't love that? Hello, Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. Let's get into it. But like I also want to know beyond that, all of the things that you have going on for you. Because I don't want to just get with someone who's like in a 9 to 5 and they don't do anything else. Like, what do you do outside of that? Like your job can be boring, whatever pays the bills, cool. But like, I want to hear what your ambitions outside of that are. I want to hear what else you're doing. And all of those things are attractive to me. And I love that that is where I've kind of fallen on the spectrum of sexuality, where it's like, I can find you physically attractive, but the other things are the things that really do it for me.
absolutely. And knowing that about yourself, comes with time. And so, in our 20s, and often our 30s, and sometimes even our 40s, you know, um, we're still trying to figure all of that out. What really gets you going, what really turns you on, what really makes you want to be with that person, and learn more about them, and that is something that is not instantaneous. It's something that you really have to
No,
learn about yourself over time. So, age is just a number, but as you get older, you learn so much more about yourself, and you're so much more clear about what you want.
Yeah.
that I personally feel like, my 20s were my time to, heal from a lot of stuff and get over a lot of things. And now I'm really feeling like I'm in my prime. Would you say that you feel that way as well, since you're an older an older
An,
millennial now?
an elder millennial. Um, I mean, I don't know if I would say I feel like I'm in my prime. Um, I feel like I'm coming into my own, like if that's what you mean by prime. I think that my 20s was basically a game of like, let's put our mouth on it and see what happens. Like that's or like let's touch it or put it in and see where it goes. But in into my 30s, like again, and I feel it in some ways I'm a little stunted because of the cancer experience, giving me a whole different start over reset perspective button that I'm like, what? Um, but I'm fast approaching my 40s, which I'm a little nervous about just because of, again, social pressures of where you quote unquote should be in your life and aren't. And we love those.
Throw all of that out the window. Throw
I
it all
know
out.
I'm trying so hard. Um, but I do feel like am not in my prime just yet, but I feel like I'm approaching it. And I think it
Well,
is, as you said, in
I love the fact that you know that it is ahead of you and not behind you, because I feel
yes,
like our society teaches us that youth is your prime, and it
right,
may be
youth and
for,
beauty and vitality, blah, 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 blah.
it may be for certain things, but for a lot of things and for life in general, I really don't think so. I really think that your prime
Yeah.
is ahead of you still. So, I definitely can't wait to see, what your life has in store for you, and I will definitely be following you. I like to ask this question to all of my guests, and I know we're kind of running a little bit low on time now, so I want to just ask this because I always think this is a really fun question to ask my guests, and I hope it's not too personal.
Let's do
What
it.
is your favorite sex position?
Okay, so this kind of ties into what I was saying before about how I need to know more about you to be like really that into you. But honestly, like most people find this to be so boring. I love it. I am very much a missionary guy. I want to be able to see your face. I want to be able to connect with you in that way and really kind of like make that in my mind circuit complete where you have like your face to face and then like parts to parts and creating that circuit energy between the two of you. It's kind of always been that way, and I've always kind of felt nerdy and stupid about it, but like I'm owning it. I love it.
I mean, obviously the connection when you're face to face with somebody, you can look into their eyes,
Yeah,
visual gaze is so key when you're, connecting with a partner. So I could see that is, and it's not a boring position, it's what you make of it. It can be a boring position, but it also, can be a really hot position too, and a really great position to connect with your partner. So,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. I love that position too. And there's
Less shame.
so many variations of it, that you can do,
Yeah.
which can be super sexy and hot as well. So, definitely. Tell me where my guests can find you, and the listeners can find you.
I am on Instagram and TikTok and all other and now Threads and all other social media platforms at my name, Edward Miskie. And you can also find my book at the Drama Bookshop if you're in New York City. Otherwise, it is on online at Barnes and Noble and Walmart and Amazon and Apple Books and so many others.
Awesome. Well, go look for that book, and be looking out for the TV series coming out when?
Oh, I don't even have a date for that. We are very much in the
Okay.
early stages of this, but it's happening and we're very excited. It's just
So
we
it's
don't we don't know yet, but keep an eye on me, follow me. We'll be posting about it often.
absolutely. Edward, it has been such a blast to talk to you today and get your insights into something that we often don't talk about. When going through difficult times, sex can be a huge coping tool. And the bottom line is that we all deserve pleasure. No matter what you are going through, we have the ability to touch ourselves and release those feel good chemicals that make any day better. You can harness your sexuality to make your life better, and I think Edward has accomplished that through his tough times. As a licensed physical therapy, I treat conditions such as erectile dysfunction that often occur after treatments such as chemo, radiation, and surgeries to the pelvis. If this is you, go to pleaseme.online and reach out to me. I am here to help. My joy is to help others get their groove back. I also treat women's conditions such as incontinence, decreased vaginal sensitivity, and dryness, which are also side effects of cancer treatments. So don't be shy and go visit me on pleaseme.online for an appointment to see me either in person or virtually. Thank you so much, Edward, for being on Please Me. You are amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time. Visit pleaseme.online to reach Eve or for more information on products to increase blood flow and overall health, for her curated list of her favorite toys, and for swag that shows that you are a big fan. Please consider supporting the show.